All right. What's up, guys, coaches? Appreciate y'all joining on to our second week of three-level panel. Did this just to kind of help. Obviously, there's so many panels going on right now, so just wanted to help coaches and hear from guys on three different levels. I think in the same panel, guys can bounce ideas off each other. If one guy says something, another guy can back them up, different things like that. So appreciate you guys joining. We got three really high level dudes um, going today that I'm excited to hear from. Um, I've known all three kind of on different levels. Anywhere ranging from Q going back to camp days at PC. Russ, I remember the first time we talked, I was in a car ride and got your number from Gus Hauser. And then Top, I feel like I've known you for years, even though we just talked for the first time a couple weeks ago. So excited to hear from everybody. We'll get started. Obviously, kind of what we'll do is each guy will talk for a few minutes, and then we'll kind of open up for questions from anybody like that, real laid back. So, Q, you good to go to start?
Yeah, I'm good to go. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, first off, David, thanks for having me, man. Obviously, my name is Quinton Ferrell. I'm the head basketball coach at Presbyterian College. I know David wanted me to give a little bit of my background, my journey. And for me, my journey started in North Augusta, South Carolina. That's my hometown. Played at North Augusta High School. Went on to go to PC and play for Greg Nybert. And during my senior year, he actually offered me an assistant coaching job. We were making the transition from Division II to Division I the next year. Got on staff. First year was pretty much a volunteer spot for the third assistant spot. So started out, had to get a part-time job, in Clinton, South Carolina. Obviously as a young coach, I knew I wanted to be in this profession. So, my mindset was, there wasn't going to be a plan B. So I had to do everything I could to make it work. And for the first 2 years of my coaching career at PC, I worked in a Sprint store that a family owned in downtown Clinton. And obviously Clinton's a small town. And it was interesting because in that store, when I worked there, it was a cell phone place, but, they provided, home phone services, internet service, and obviously selling cell phones. And so I really got to be a sales guy and learn how to obviously communicate and, try to talk people into, buying phones and signing up for these services. So, early on, it started to help me in terms of recruiting and, building relationships with people and things like that. And then I spent the next 3 years, was fortunate to move up on staff going into year 3 to the second assistant spot, which was a full-time spot. Did that for, like I said, the next 3 years, and was fortunate enough after my 5th year to move on to the Citadel on Chuck Drizel's staff. Was only there for 1 year, but learned a lot, under him. Got a chance to meet Lefty, and he actually came on a couple trips. And, even then, he was very, very impressive. I actually learned, quite a bit in the short time I was around him, gave good advice. And then after that season, I moved on to West Point, up in New York in the Patriot League. I worked for a guy named Zach Spiker, who's now the head coach at Drexel. And, my time there was very beneficial for me because being from the South and, having been in the Southeast my whole career up until that point, getting in the Patriot League up in the Northeast, every team in our league, ran some type of, Princeton offense, took elements out of the Princeton and ran it. So it was a totally different style of basketball for me. So being a young assistant, it really kind of gave me some more tools to my toolbox in terms of, just the way the game's played. And we ran 2 guard in Princeton at Army. So, so my year there was very beneficial. And I was actually, headed back for my second year when Earl Grant, one of my longtime mentors, got the head job at the College of Charleston. And so this would have been obviously the fall of 2014. I was fortunate enough to land on his staff, at the College of Charleston. And, that's where I was prior to PC. I spent 5 years there. And for me at the time, it was obviously the highest level I ever got to as an assistant. And, I know a lot of times we talk about good job versus bad job. It was, from facilities and, town and all these different things that, we place value on. It was the best job, program I had been a part of. And, our first year there didn't start off great. We set the loss record in the season for that program. We went 9-24, in year one. And I can just remember Coach, he never wavered though. Like, his confidence, seeing him handle that, that first year was huge for me as a young coach, because obviously you guys know, after every game, he's standing in the front of the room and everybody's looking at him. And I watched, as a young assistant, how he handled, coming into that locker room. It felt like every game after a loss, you know what I mean? You go 9-24. I mean, you're not winning a lot, throughout the season. And so I think his resilience, his toughness, man, obviously he was the perfect guy for the job, because we were able to kind of climb out of that hole. And then year two, we go 17-14, and our starting backcourt, suffered season-ending injuries. And then we go on to win, 25 games in year three, get to the championship game and lose to Wilmington, Kevin Keats. And then we come back, win 26 games and win it all. And then my last year there, we won 24 games and fell short in the semi. So, for me, I've been very blessed and fortunate to be around a lot of great coaches, had a lot of great mentors, took advantage of, opportunities like what we're doing today. And, last spring in 2019, I was fortunate enough to land a head coaching job at my alma mater. This first year was a whirlwind. Really enjoyed it. Great experience. And, now I'm just looking forward to, building a program myself.
Sure. Now, Q, let's talk a little bit about some of the things as far as some nuggets you've learned maybe throughout the coaching profession, and then especially you being a first-year head coach. What are some of the things you learned in your first year as a head coach?
Yeah, well, one of the things I definitely wanted, because I know you talked about you wanted me to give a couple coaching nuggets. One of the things I did want to touch on was some of the things I learned over the years of, why I felt like I was able to advance in my career as a young assistant. Because again, I had unbelievable mentors, throughout my career and still to this day. But one of the things like I wanted to talk about was, investing in your own personal growth, as an assistant coach. I just think that's really, really important. You take scouting, for instance. I was taught early on, watching film, like there's so many things you learn from it. Obviously, you can learn from a strategic standpoint, what teams are doing offensively and defensively. You can obviously help your players improve from an individual standpoint, from a player development side. And so I just think, obviously investing in watching film, is another huge way, to invest in your own personal growth. Scouting, obviously, you watch film, you're going to get better at being a guy that, in terms of scouting other opponents is going to help you. And my college coach, Coach Toppert, he was probably a guy, I guess, of me working for that stressed that the most. He was an old school guy and, believed in watching a ton of film. And so as a young coach, 21, 22, 23, we spent a lot of time watching film. And as I moved forward, I could tell those early years, it really helped me, from a coaching side, understand, offenses and defenses and things of that nature. I think another thing that's huge, is the player development side. And I think that's twofold. I think everybody should take value in being really good at player development, because one, it makes you more of an asset as an individual. And then we all know most of the jobs, no matter what level, truthfully, high major, mid major, low major, but it also is going to benefit your program that you're working for if you can help the players get better. So I think player development, it's a huge way, to impact, like I said, not only yourself, but the program as well. And then the other thing I think that's important is building relationships, with your players and understanding how important that is. And not just, when you're at practice and when you're, kind of scheduled to be around them, but doing more in terms of, spending time, in the locker room after practice, maybe going over and visiting them in their dorm or their apartment, taking a guy to breakfast, taking a guy to lunch, all these things that you hear about, but really commit to doing these things, consistently, I think is really, really important. And the other thing I think that, and I know we got probably some different guys on here at different, stages in their career, but I definitely think obviously we're never too old to learn. And I think one of the best things as an assistant, as a young person, and even as a head coach is, listening, listening. Because a lot of times, we all are really confident in what we do, but I think you have to be humble enough to make sure you're always willing to learn and listen and know that you don't know everything. You know what I mean? I think that was big for me early on, because if you got good people giving you good information, just take a second to sit back and digest it. So I just think listening and learning is a huge component, man, to advancing in your career. And then similar to like a player, consistency, you know what I mean? Because, like I said, we'll all do different things, get all this great information from different people. And then once you walk away from it, you may do it for a little bit, you may do it for a week, but, just being truly committed to, doing the work and carrying it out on a day-to-day basis. So I think consistency, for all of us is huge in terms of being able to advance, man. And David, what was the last part you wanted me to touch on about my first year as a head coach?
Yeah, just kind of some of the things you learned. Obviously, you talked a little bit ago about, you watching Coach Grant your first year kind of go through that 9-24 season,
right,
and whatnot. Just kind of some of the things. But obviously, it's kind of one of those things where you can learn all you want, but until you're in that actual seat, that first chair, you don't really learn. So just kind of talk about some of the things that you maybe took from Coach Grant or that you just really experienced your first year as a head coach.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when it comes to my first year, what I learned was, if you've done a really good job of, preparing yourself to become a head coach, that's going to, carry huge dividends for you, once you become a head coach. Because again, you're not going to be prepared enough until obviously once you're in it. You know what I mean? And so once you're in it, you're going to go through different things. And it was amazing to me to see the things that you worked hard at and you kind of prepared yourself for, how they just naturally came out, in adverse situations. So I think one of the biggest things too is, I learned that, you have to stay confident, you know what I mean, in what you believe in. Because, for instance, for me, we got off to a 3-10 start this year in the non-conference. And so even though I was an assistant the past 3 years at Charleston, we averaged 25 wins. So it had been a while, since I had been, subjected to losing, that frequently, and then so it was different. But the beautiful thing that happened this year for me was we were 3-10 and we were coming off Christmas break, and we went on to win 6 in a row and 7 out of 8. And so that stretch taught me, what we were doing, work, the things that we were emphasizing were the right things. And so, that was, I felt like that gave me confirmation in the middle of the year when, 3-10, like, we all know it, man, after losing games or whatever, it's, it can be tough, man, the environment, assistant coaches, players, everybody looking around. And so for me to kind of receive that confirmation, because I tried to do what I saw the coaches before me do, kept my head down, kept working every day, kept, the message consistent. And then lo and behold, we had a stretch where we started playing really good basketball. And, so that was one of the biggest things I took away, from my first year.
Okay. Russ, you had a question?
Yeah, what's going on, Q?
What's up, Russ?
I'm good, man. Quick question for you.
Yeah.
I know that I went through it too when I got moved up and to an assistant, and a lot of people on this board probably will go through it. So interested to hear your opinion. How do you change that image from you were hired as a GA and then you get moved up to assistant, or you were a player and then you get moved up to an assistant, and some of these guys that you were just running sprints with, you're now having to hold accountable? How do you change that image? How do you bridge that gap? Because as a head coach, you can't have the same relationship you had as an assistant, but you still got to have a good relationship. So how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, you talking about in terms of being the assistant or now as a head coach?
Just moving up and changing that image from your last title to the next one. So for administration at Presbyterian, they saw you as a player and assistant. Now you're coming in as a head coach. When you moved up from the player to assistant, your players saw you as a player
Right.
3 months before that.
Right.
How do you, when you get bumped up, how do you bridge that gap, change that image?
You know, that's a great question. And I don't have a perfect answer to that. But the one thing I talk about, even with my staff, because I have some younger guys as well, I think you just have to be really intentional about how you conduct yourself. You know what I mean? And I think there's a level of professionalism, even when you're younger, or, you know, you've got 3 or 4 years as an assistant. Anytime you're in the position that you're in, I think you got to know where you want to go. You know what I mean? I think you got to have enough foresight and understanding that, you know, you got to demand your respect. And a lot of times how you demand your respect is, again, how you carry yourself, you know, how you handle guys. You know, because I can remember being a 21-year-old assistant and, you know, guys I had just played with, you know, and making that transition from, you know, I still know people on campus. I went to school there, all these types of things. And, you know, I had to be mature enough to say on a Saturday night, like, I'm not going out to the frat houses with the guys. You know what I mean? And I did that. I made that distinction. And, you know, and I was fortunate enough too. I was working for me, starting out, a very experienced head coach. And I always tell people this, you know, some of the best advice I got right away was my college coach said, if you want to last in this profession, you got to be able to coach your best player hard. And that was just something he believed in. And it was almost like my first year or two, like, he was always watching me on the practice floor to see if, you know, if I was giving guys, you know, constructive criticism, and if I would, you know, jump a guy and get on him when the time presented itself, if I needed to. It was like, and I had to get comfortable with that, you know, as a young coach, and, you know, and find my voice and all these things. But, you know, I did have great leadership from our head coach to kind of help me navigate my way through that. But again, I think the biggest thing with that too is just being yourself too. You know what I mean? Because everybody has different personalities. Even if you're a guy that's a more, you know, outgoing, extroverted personality, smile a lot, you know, I still think there's a way, you know, you could obviously demand your respect, like I said, in decisions that you make and kind of how you deal with guys. Maybe for me, it was a little bit easier because I'm probably more serious by nature. But it still was difficult because, again, you're looking at these guys and then they know you too on a different level. And I just think, again, how you approach those relationships is everything in terms of them understanding, okay, coach is coach and he's got a job to do. This is a profession. Yeah. David, did you want me to touch on anything else, or is it up for questions? How do you want me to?
Yeah, if anyone has a question, they could just chime in. One thing too I wanted to ask you is, you being a first-year coach, hiring a staff, what went into you? Was it more guys that you know, or, you know, what went into you hiring a staff your first year?
Yeah, so, you know, obviously for me, I leaned on, you know, mentors heavily, you know, once I got the job, in terms of that part of it, because obviously that's an extremely important, to me, pillar of your program when you get a chance to have a program. And, you know, one of the biggest things that I've always come up, you know, learning was loyalty. And that's what every guy I worked for talked about. So, you know, I don't know how it is for other guys, but that was something that was huge with all the guys I worked for. And so the number one thing I wanted to make sure was whoever I hired initially, you know, they were guys that, you know, had character, and, you know, they were going to be loyal to you. Because, you know, being on different staffs, and obviously whether you're a first-year coach or, you know, 10th-year coach, every season you're going to hit some type of adversity. And I can just remember Coach Grant telling me, man, you know, it felt good when he looked in the room and looked around at his coaches, you know, the guys that he was looking around and looking to their eyes, he felt like, you know, they had his back 110%. And that was something he never had to worry about. So, you know, that was a huge component to me picking my assistants, you know, first time around. And obviously, I think a lot of times when you get your first job, you know, you could potentially maybe hire guys that you know, better than maybe after you're doing it a couple of years and you start losing guys off your staff. Another thing was, for me, was, you know, trying to get guys who were hard workers, you know what I mean? And trying to really dive into that, you know, because there's guys that, you know, and there's some guys, you know, that you probably feel like, you know, from you knowing them, work harder than others. You know what I mean? Obviously, it's your opinion, but, you know, so trying to find guys that you felt like were hard workers, who were going to be self-motivated, you know, not wait around for me to always give them direction. You know what I mean? Guys that went and tried to get stuff done. You know, that was really important to me. Wanted guys that were team guys, David, you know what I mean? just because, again, we all have ego, which is nothing wrong with that, but you have to be a team guy. You got to be unselfish. You know what I mean? You got to always do things in terms of what's best for the program and that, in that line of thinking. And so that was really important for me too, just having worked on so many staffs with different coaches, making sure I got guys that, if they were kind of alike in that aspect, that they could have good staff chemistry, amongst the assistants. Also kind of wanted guys to just really understand, the importance of building relationships with the players. You know what I mean? Because again, that's just a thing that I feel like you really help the head coach in that area. Even if it's something that you don't love to do, I just still think it's important because I think it alleviates a lot of issues, ahead of time. And, allows the head coach maybe to focus on other things because your assistants are so in tune with the guys and what's going on, that they can take some stuff off the head coach's plate, in that regard. And then the last thing I wanted, man, you want to try to get guys that you feel like will be a reflection, of you when you're not present, whether it's across campus, whether it's out on the road recruiting, you want to feel good about the guys that you have, that they're going to have integrity, that are going to make the right decisions. Obviously, with our sport, the business and things have changed and, certain things obviously been going on forever, but, it's just really, really important to have guys that you feel like are going to be, great representation, of yourself. And because it's one of those things, we're all bound together in terms of the staff because, if anybody makes one bad mistake, it could cost everybody and their families their livelihood. So, I just always tried to think of it that way. You know what I mean? Even for me as the head coach, if I make the wrong decision or do something bad, a lot of guys and their families could be without a job. And so you just want guys to be mindful of those types of things. You know what I mean?
Sure, absolutely. No, that's really good. Top, you had a question?
Yeah, so my question pertains to, kind of your daily routine. How often are you gathering your staff together? How long before practice are you gathering your staff together? How do you feel about encouraging, staff conflict in a way that can be positive at this level?
Yeah, so, I've actually, most of the guys I work for, we met pretty frequently. And so my guys, I could tell a couple of my guys, because obviously we hadn't worked together, and we actually met pretty much every other morning, I would say. I mean, we meet a good bit. Sometimes they're not as long, but it's just for me just to communicate, you know what I mean? Because I was always big, being an assistant, obviously, for 12 years, it was always frustrating sometimes, and at every place and on every staff, every year is kind of different. But I was always frustrated at times, sometimes the lack of communication in terms of, just kind of knowing what, may be wanted or from an individual standpoint or from a staff standpoint. So I just kind of felt like I always wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page and knew what was expected and kind of what we were, planning. And so, we would meet a pretty good bit, man, in the mornings. And just, like I said, talk whatever we need to talk, whether it was recruiting, whether it was our team, whether it was film or anything like that. And then I think the second part of your question, you talked about conflict in terms of with the staff talking about things. I'm a huge proponent of, not being a yes man or, company line. Like I really want feedback, from all of my guys. So we have pretty spirited, meetings in terms of when we're talking about things, because I just feel like it was one way too for assistant coaches and, all coaches to get better. You know what I mean? Because, if you're going to say something, I feel like you need to be able to articulate it and stand on it, and not change your opinion if you're the only one in the room that believes that. So I'm all for, us, for guys speaking their truth and having an opinion as long as they, are ready to back it up.
Also, another question about your practice planning technique. How do you kind of go about that? Are you like meeting with the staff prior to the practice and all that type of stuff?
Yeah, so so from a planning standpoint, when we have some of those meetings, I like to get their input on, maybe what's things that they feel like we need to work on, things that we're not doing as well. Obviously, they already know some of the things that are important to our program, and so. It might be a guy might say, man, coach, we need to really do this drill today, to work on our transition defense. We're slipping a little bit. So I give them input from that standpoint. But I always try to plan, before the season starts, a lot of coaches, at least from the ones I talk to, you kind of plan it out, the first 30, 45 days as you can, once, in the preseason before you actually tip off official practice. And, again, like I said, I take their thoughts in and ask them questions about, different things in regards to practice as I'm planning it.
And what time of the day do you guys practice?
We typically practice at 3:00. That was pretty consistent for us all year this past year. And so, a lot of times we would probably meet after lunch, just to discuss practice, around, 1:30 before we went out on the floor.
Does anyone else have any questions for Coach Q? Anyone? Coach, what is if people want to stay in touch with you, follow up after, if they have any other questions, what's a way for people to stay in touch?
Yeah, if you definitely want to stay in touch, man, my email is QM and then my last name Ferrell, FERRELL @Presby, PRESBY.edu. And then if you email me and you want to exchange numbers and stuff, I'd be definitely fine with that as well. But QMFerrell @Presby.edu.
Okay. Well, Q, I appreciate you coming on. I think we got a lot of good stuff from you, and I really appreciate you coming on, sharing with us.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, we'll move on. Russ, you ready? You sleeping?
Yeah, I'm good. Y'all good?
I didn't wake you up, did I?
No. I appreciate you having me on, Q. That was big time, man. That was big time. Appreciate you sharing. So I appreciate David and Rising Coaches and Adam Gordon and this platform. You guys have provided a lot of positive resources during this COVID-19. So really appreciate that. I want to just touch base a little bit about my path and then get into some coaching nuggets that I've kind of learned along the way, and then open it up for questions. I graduated high school in '99. I was not a highly recruited player. Did not play in college. Had a couple JUCOs up north, but wanted to move down south. So I went to Lee University, which was NAI at the time. They're Division II now. But I started off as a student manager, and coach would put me in practice, and I absolutely got abused. And so I started getting up at 6 a.m. to get to the gym to work on my game. And I did that for the entire year, and then tried out for the team. And that spring, I'll never forget the conversation. He sat me down and said, "Russ, you're good enough to be on the team, but I think you got a lot of talent as a coach. So I'm going to move you from student manager to student assistant, put you on the road scouting, and because we could live scout. So if we played Covenant on a Thursday, we could go watch them play live on a Monday. So I got to live scout, I got to recruit, and I got to actually be involved in coaching meetings. So I did that, and then I was a GA for a year and graduated from Lee University $49,500 in debt. And so I was fortunate enough to get on as a GA for my second year at Tennessee Tech. And at that time, my boss was Mike Sutton, who lives in Charlotte, North Carolina now, but he was on Tubby Smith's staff at Kentucky when they won a national championship. So he had a lot of pedigree. Saul Smith, who played at Kentucky, was on our staff. And I was a GA there at the time. I made $450 a month, and they taxed me on it. So I really walked away with about $417. I had to pay for my car, fuel, gas, housing. And my parents didn't have a ton of money. And with that being said, I had to push my student loans back just to be able to afford being a GA. But the unique part of my GA position was my boss was hit with a rare condition called Guillain-Barré syndrome. And so he was in the hospital, and he interviewed me from his hospital bed, but he was in the hospital for probably 5 months after I took the job in June. And so he didn't get out till November. So July recruiting, preseason workouts, I was able to be on the floor like an assistant coach. So I got great experience there. And then that spring, a year after I got there, we had an assistant leave, and I was fortunate enough to get moved up full time. So spent 8 years at Tennessee Tech, Then went to South Alabama, worked under Matthew Graves, who was Brad Stevens' top assistant, learned a ton, unbelievable basketball mind. But sometimes things don't work out, and we ended up getting let go after year 5. Wouldn't change anything about it. Recruited the right kids, just couldn't make that jump. We were right there around 500 every year. Loved our staff, felt like I learned a ton. But at the end of the day, if you're in this business long enough, it'll happen. And then I been fortunate enough to be with Penny Collins the last, just finished year 2 here at Tennessee State. We went 9-18 or 9-20 our first year. And this year we bumped up to 18. So we made a pretty significant jump. And that's a testament to the people I work with. Got an unbelievable staff, and my boss is really good. He gives me a lot of freedom. So to do your job, which I think is important. Touching on some things I've learned along the way. And again, I'm sure there's a lot more, but these I felt like were the most important things. It's not about you, and it's not about me. It's about the players, and it's about the program. And one hard lesson I had to learn at a young age, I wanted credit for every kid I signed. I wanted credit for everything we did. I think that's part of growing up. And I think that's the wrong way to go about it. You know, at the end of the day, if you win, if your team wins, everybody eats. And so it's not about, I think when you start dividing lines about I do this, I do that, he signed this, he signed that, I think you start building silos, and I think that causes division. And wasn't intentional, but that's something I've had to learn along the way. Another thing, I think I heard Jay Billis say this. I think it's one of the best quotes I've heard. You can't get to the top of the ladder in one step, but you can get to the bottom in one step. And so basically what he's saying is take your time and stay focused on the task at hand. And from a philosophical standpoint too, you know, there's a lot of, you know, ways you can bend rules and stuff like that. You can sure fall quick. And there's been plenty of stories of people that have done that. And so understand you can't climb the ladder in one step, but you can fall in one step. Another thing I like Jay Billis said, he didn't say this part, but I got it from it, is own your room. Whatever your responsibility is. So Coach Toppert, could be skill development. It could be working with the point guards. It could be academics. It could be equipment. Whatever you are assigned, do it to the best of your ability. Do it, own your room, own your platform. And that way your boss can give you more responsibility. Here's the quote that Jay Billis said: you're responsible to the element, accountable to the mission. So the mission is the team and winning and all that stuff, but whatever your element is as an assistant, do it to the best of your ability. Have a solution before the question's asked. So for an example, if you know, one of your players is struggling in a philosophy class, well, you should already know when assignments are done before your head coach asks. If, you know, you feel like you've been watching film, you feel like Q said, struggling a little bit in transition defense, you should already have some numbers before your boss asks. So whatever your responsibilities are, know them and have solutions before they're asked. Another one is be where your feet are. And I know that's cliche, but don't pursue every job that's open. Plant and grow. You know, I've just finished my 15th year. I've worked for 4 different head coaches, but been at 3 different places, and have had opportunities to leave. And at the end of the day, my personal opinion is I want to make where I'm at the best job in the country. And if I can do that and I feel like I've done that, then I can look at pursuing other things. But at the end of the day, be where your feet are. If you're busy chasing other jobs, I think you lose sight of your players. You lose sight of your coaches you work with. I think you lose sight of a lot of different things. Another thing, 3 people that cannot have bad days in your program: your point guard, your best player, and the head coach. And I think as assistants, we can make sure that 2 of those 3 never happen. So if you have relationships like Q was talking about with your point guard and the best player, you can make sure those 2 are ready to go every day. So make sure the 3 people in your program that can't have bad days are your point guard, your best player, and your head coach. And as an assistant, I think we can be responsible for 2 of those 3 to make sure they're always ready. 2 more things. Find a way to bring value. And with that, I thought, think like a head coach. So, there's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. And most head coaches know what they want to run. They know their system. So find ways to make that system better. Don't find ways to come in and try to overhaul the entire system. They know what they want to do. Find ways to make – so if your boss is a big 5-out motion guy, if he's a big 4-round 1, if he's big horns, find some quick hitters. Find some things within the flow of that offense that can bring value, okay? Think like a head coach. If something doesn't work, you're not just going to overhaul everything. You're going to make tweaks to it. And then last thing, I think, pursue people, not prestige. It's not who you work, it's who you work with and for versus where you work. I think people are the most important thing in building relationships and working for the right guy and working with the right staff, I think goes a long way in this business. That's kind of what I had, Dave. So if you want to open it up to questions.
Sure, yeah. If anyone has a question, you can raise your hand or you just chime in. It's real laid back. Russ, I did want to ask you. Oh, go ahead,
chime
Tom.
in. Yeah, so hypothetical for you, right? Let's just say, you feel strongly about some particular subject or whatever, you know what I mean? And, you're trying to catch your coach's ear on it. Perhaps there's pushback from other people on the staff or whatever. Just give us some type of problem-solving, solution-based way that you would go about, because let's say you feel convicted on this particular subject, right? How would you go about, not pushing your agenda, so to speak, but, if you feel strongly about something that's going to help the team and ultimately help the coach, how do you go about in a room of, perhaps maybe differing ideas, right, to sway that if you're the only voice in the room?
I'll make sure you have specific data to back it up, numbers, plays. If it's a basketball related thing, I think the other thing I would do is make sure that it's not brought up. In my opinion, hey, I talked with the other guys on the staff. They didn't see because I think then you start to have silos, and then I would have a feel for it. If your boss has had a lot on his plate that day, then I probably wouldn't bring it to him that day, but I'd make sure it's behind closed doors. I'd make sure the setting's right. I'd make sure you plan it out where, hey, coach, you got 10 minutes later today that we can sit down and talk about something I've been working on. And that's happened within our staff. And, like Q was saying, as far as the healthy banter going back and forth about what's right and what's wrong, at the end of the day, once you walk out that office, if I went and presented something to coach and he said, I don't like it at all, as soon as you walk out of that office, it's done. It can't be one of those things that I told you so. I knew it. It can't. Once you leave, it's done. So you may have an argument with another assistant on staff and say, I feel like this is the right way to do. I think this is not the right way to do. As soon as you walk out that door and go to practice, everybody's on the same page. That answer it, Cody?
Yes.
Hey, Coach, you said that you guys went 9-18 your first year, and then you improved to winning 18 games this year, right?
Yeah.
So, and maybe the latter part of that first year, what was the mentality from a coaching staff to continue to get your guys to continue to buy in and trust the process? Obviously for you guys to have a productive off season and a pretty good year this year.
I think it was the tone that my head coach set. I mean, he's unbelievable. He's a high energy guy. I mean, we didn't just go from 9 wins to 18 wins. We went from averaging 900 fans a game, dead last in our league, to 3,400, which was tied for second. And I honestly think we would have been closer to taking the lead for overall attendance if we didn't have 5 games when students weren't there. So I think it's the tone he set. He never let us have bad days. He'd get on us, coach, man, they're just not buying in. Well, it's your job to get them to buy in. Go spend some extra time with them. And it was the tone he set to get better every day. Don't whine. Don't complain. These are our guys. Yeah, we inherited them, but they're our guys. And it was a tone that he set to get our guys better every day, whether it was extra film, extra workouts, extra shots. It was find a way to get these guys better.
Blake had a question. Go ahead, Blake.
Yeah, so you started off as a manager, you said. So how did you handle being a manager and like also staying loyal to your coach? Like how did you, I know you kind of asked you the same question, but how did you bridge that gap between like, obviously you want to, for example, with AW, my job kind of is not necessarily to give him all the info, but he wants me to like, if there's anything he needs to know, obviously to let him know. But how do you bridge that between making sure he knows everything he needs to know, but also staying close enough with the players that, you know what I mean, they trust you? Like I would never want to benefit their trust because obviously I want to build and go on up and do whatever I need to do, but I want to keep that loyalty both ways. How did you do that in between?
Yeah, you know, one of the guys I'm the same age with him is Brandon Fritz. He's the principal up there at Madison Central in Richmond. And Fritz and I were the same age, freshmen together, and he was in my wedding when I got married 10 years ago. And it was a fine line. I mean, it's one of those things like you can go to the cafeteria, you can go out and you can go eat with them and you can hang out, but anytime that it becomes, you know, something they should not be doing, you've got to excuse yourself. And, you know, if it was, hey, we're going out to a party tonight, hey guys, we shouldn't be doing that. I ain't going. And kind of, you know, that way if coach asks, well, coach, I wasn't there, you know, because again, you're a liaison. So it's hard because you want to have his trust, but you also can't betray their trust either. But if it gets to the point that it's illegal, if it's an underage kid drinking or something like that, then that's something maybe I would go have a conversation with the kid first. Say, listen, man, you can't be doing that. Number one, it's illegal. Number two, if it's against team policy, then hey, it's against team policy. But I would take it up with him and then maybe an assistant first, and then get it to the head coach after that.
Thank you.
Coach, I got one. Good to chat with you as always.
Thanks. How are you?
Good, man. So this is going years back when you were writing for College Chalk Talk. It's just kind of a two-part question. One, what made you do that? Two, how much credit do you give there to the relationships you built? People talk about your brand. That could have been a form of you adding value just with your name recognition. Just kind of talk about that experience and what that did for you.
Yeah, I think anytime you are doing something to promote your program, first I would ask your head coach to make sure he's okay with it. Because at the end of the day, it's his program. And you know, like Nick Saban at Alabama, I don't think he lets his assistants speak to the media. So, you know, you've got to make sure your head coach is aware of it. And then if he's okay with it, I think anything you can do to promote your program, I think it's beneficial, you know, as far as, you know, as long as everything's aligned, you know, the vision's the same, you're speaking the right language and all that stuff. I think all that stuff is good. And it spreads the word of the things we're doing. Like when I gave that building baseline out of bounds for that virtual coaches clinic, I had my presentation done. And afterwards, before I presented, I called my boss and I was like, Coach, are you okay with me, you know, showing what we run? He's like, yeah, as long as everybody sees TSU, go with it. And so you've got to make sure your boss is okay with it. But I think anytime you can have practice writing, you can, you know, put something out there about your program so people see the benefit of it. I think that's a positive.
Thank you.
Russ, Coach Mims asked one in the chat. How did you get yourself through personal lows during a losing stretch or a loss on a scout game?
I think you've got to have your circle. You know, Chris Kreider is on this call. It's one of my best friends. I probably wear him out more than anybody. Him and I talk every day. So I think you've got to have a circle of guys that you trust. And then also I think you've got to have, you know, a wide vision and not see what's right in front of you, but the long term. You know, when we got let go at South Alabama, it was hard. We actually got let go in March, and then I lost my mother to a 2-year battle for cancer about 3 weeks later. So I was battling, going through my first time. I'd spent 12 years in this business before I got let go. Plus, I lost my mother. I'm traveling back and forth between New York and Mobile, Alabama, trying to find a job. And if it wasn't for my wife, if it wasn't for my family, if it wasn't for my circle, it's hard to get through. So I think you've got to have a tight circle. I think you've got to have faith. My wife and I'm not perfect. She's not perfect. We pay our tithe 10% every month to the church. And since we've been doing it, since we've been married, my salary has increased every year. So I don't know if that's a direct reflection of that, but I know it works for us. And I would tell you that when you're in one of those deep times, pray, have faith, confide in your circle, and then have confidence that you did everything you could to do it the right way. You know, when we got let go at South, I interviewed with Michael Fly at Florida Gulf Coast, and one of the athletic directors, Michael Estes, asked me, he said, tell me a time that you did everything right and things didn't work out. I said, shoot, the last 5 years at South Alabama. Perfect APR for 3 straight years, graduated every player, never had a kid arrested, and we built it to have success in year 4. And literally 2 days before summer school, we had a point guard that transferred. Well, my boss came from Butler. He wants to develop guys, so you can't just go out and sign a D1 transfer and him be okay with it. As assistant, you've got to recruit to your head coach. It's not about the best player, I think. It's the best player that he can coach. And so we had a kid leave, and it really hurt us. We felt like year 4 was our year to win 22 games. And it's funny because if we would have won 22 games that year, 22 games, that was the year that Butler opened up when Holtman left. So my boss probably would have been the next head coach at Butler. So there's a fine line. But I would tell you, when you're in those tough times, rely on your circle, rely on your faith, rely on your family. Dave, you're muted. There you
go. Go ahead, Blake.
Also, another question, Coach. Obviously, you were a manager again at some point. What were some of the things you said that you did scout team and you did a couple other things, and then you went and try out and you said you were talented enough to make the team? What were some of the things that you did? Did he give you any specifics on what you did to make you more of a coach in his eyes, make you more of like a go ahead and start your career? What were kind of some of the things that you did that kind of stuck out to make you that way and to kind of go ahead and plant your feet at that point?
I just invested in our guys. Like, we had a kid sitting out one year that he was a D2 transfer, but he was short credit wise. So like after games, him and I would be in the gym getting shots up till 11:30. Friday night, being there getting shots up. I just did everything I could. I was around, so any free time I had, I wasn't hanging out in the cafeteria. I wasn't hanging out at they had the Ped Mall where I went to college at. Wasn't hanging out there. I literally was in class, or I was at the gym, and I was working on helping. What's funny is the assistant at the time is actually my brother-in-law now. So he was dating my sister at the time, so I was pretty close with him. So I would just go sit in his office. Hey, you need help with anything? It could have been as small as, and that's what I'm saying, owning your room. It was as small as addressing envelopes. Well, you do that to the best of your ability, because if you're addressing an envelope and you screw up and you got a little scribble on there and then you still try to send that out, that's a reflection on you, So it's everything you do, and it's a cliche, but it's the truth. Everything you do, you're being interviewed. My first year as a manager, and I told this story the other day. One of my jobs was to sweep the floors every day. And so I literally did not have time to eat lunch in between class and practice. So I would pack a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in my dorm for that morning. And I put it in my bag and I'd eat it as I'm sweeping the floor. And I'm like, man, this is stupid. Coach never says anything about me sweeping the floor. I've been doing it for 2 months now. Nothing's ever said. So I skipped it a day. He calls me over and he says, hey, did you sweep the floor today? This is in the middle of practice. I said, no, Coach. He said, why not? I said, I just didn't do it today. He goes, well, if you ever do that again, you're fired. And so again, own your room, whatever it is. Coach may not come up to you, Blake, and say, man, you're doing a great job. He may not do that every day, but I promise you, he notices everything you're doing. I got a question for you. Give me the keys to that press. Because, yeah, we won 18 games this year, but we damn had 3. We went 18-15, and 3 of our losses were to EKU in that damn press.
I'm still figuring it out, Coach. I don't know. It's working though. As we speak, it's working somehow, but it's doing it.
Anyone else got any questions for Coach Russ?
Yeah, I have one. What's up, Russ? Appreciate you sharing.
Zach, how are you?
Doing great. Thank you. To build kind of off what Blake just asked, what are some things, in addition to maybe some different things support staff guys can do, what are some things that you have done or, a staff you've been on that have done over the past years to help prepare support staff guys for that first assistant job?
I think it's to get mentors, be really close with your assistants. But then I also think too, I think you've got to let your head coach know your goals. And so I would set up a time to sit down with Coach Kelsey and say, Coach, ultimately I want to be a Division I assistant. Okay. And I understand recruiting's part of that. What can I do to put myself in position? Because for each coach, it's different. When I first got mine, it was my boss was comfortable with me. I think I was listening to someone talk the other day about what ADs look for in a head coach. And two of the questions they asked is, do I know you and do I like you? Okay. Well, I think college head coaches ask themselves the same question when they're hiring people. I mean, Q was talking about loyalty there. Well, he's not going to hire somebody that he doesn't know and that he doesn't like, even if it's a recommendation. If I got a head coaching job today and Chris Kreider called me and said, hey, man, you really need to take a look at this guy. I trust him enough, my loyalty to him, and we've got a good enough relationship that I would talk to that person. So as a head coach, if you do the best job where you're at in your ops spot, and I don't even know the rules. Can ops recruit? I know they were talking about passing that rule, and I've heard some people say they can. Some people, can you text kids?
Yeah, you can text kids. You can't call kids.
Then if I was you, without stepping on your other assistant's toes, okay, I would find an area that they're not recruiting hard in, okay, and I would start to recruit that area a little bit by texting kids. And then on top of that, and again, I'd clear it with your head coach first. But then on top of that, the other thing you can do, you guys run team camp?
Yes, sir.
I would be best friends with every single one of those high school coaches in that area. Because when a job opens up, Coach so-and-so called me from Independence. They got this player. I think he's good enough. Now all of a sudden you had the answer before the question was asked. But it's all based on what? Your relationship and the job you did with team camp as a director of ops.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else for Coach Russ? I really like that last point you said about just kind of finding the answer before the question. Russ, go ahead and if anyone wants to stay in touch with you or follow up with anything, what's a way for people to do that?
Best way is my cell phone. It's area code 931-200-8478.
Cool. Well, Russ, obviously I appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, man.
Hopefully a lot of people got a lot of good stuff from that. Now we will move on to our final coach. Top, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready to go. I don't know much about college basketball, but I'll do my best to help everybody out on this call. I'll try to be quick on my pathway to get here. But so I played at Cornell University. Actually, this young coach came in, my junior year, and I used to joke with him. I call him a gnat, boom, and it was Zach Spiker, right? So we got him. He came over, and Spike was coach for us at Cornell over there, and obviously Quinn worked for him up at Army. He did a lot of great things, but he always cared so much, and he was so detail oriented, right? At the time as a player, I'd be like, man, this dude won't get off my back, but obviously the traits that I learned from him and from Coach Diney and the rest of our staff over there, translated and helped me on the court. I was able to play afterwards for 8 years internationally. In my last year, I knew I wanted to become a coach. And, so I started learning sports code, doing all those things. I actually had an interview, with Paul Hewitt. I wanted to get Kreider's coffee over at George Mason. And, ultimately I didn't get that opportunity. Right. So, I talked on the phone with him like 3 times. I was like, man, I'm ready to go. I'm locked in, and he went a different direction. And so, right away I was like, man, this is going to be hard, if not impossible. So I went back to Dallas and I linked up, when I was in Dallas, I went to a coach's clinic for Gannon Baker he had out in Las Vegas. I thought I was going to take my wife out to Vegas and, we were going to go see some shows and have a good time. And, I ended up in the gym for about 14 hours. But luckily my brother was out there with his wife too, because my wife was like, man, where are you? You took me to Vegas and just left me and went to a gym. But, from there, I linked with Gannon and I started a training organization called the Toppert Basketball. I was in Dallas and I was training guys and working them out, obviously kind of cutting my teeth in the player development space, which was how I kind of separated myself as a player of limited athletic abilities. But, Gannon then got approached by a group called Elevate Sports Institute who had a baseball program. They wanted to start a basketball program. So, he asked me if I wanted to move out to Delray Beach, Florida and start that with him. And so I went out there and did that. And, boy, that was a grind. Gannon had me coaching 3 teams. I was an indentured servant. Y'all don't even realize. He had me coaching 3 teams. We had to practice at 6 a.m. every day, 8 a.m., and another one at 2 p.m. And the messed up thing was this dude was living in West Virginia. I'm like, how is this going to work out, right? And so, but that was honestly, it was the best thing that could have possibly ever happened, because I was just thrown into the fire in terms of, having to learn how to kind of wrangle in, a large group of kids, how to get everybody's ear, how to keep their attention, how to teach. Reps are huge in order to learn how to teach. To me, I think that's a big element of the coaching game. So anywhere you can stretch your legs and get more reps, it's just like a player working on his jump shot. All right, working on your voice, working on your teaching points, working on, kind of developing like your philosophies and your, your non-negotiables, right, if you will. And so, to me, that was a great experience. Each team had a 30-game schedule. So, I coached 90 basketball games, right? We go up to play IMG. I'm coaching the 10 a.m. game. I'm coaching the 2 p.m. game. I'm coaching the 7 p.m. game. And so, that was a lot of fun. And those were 3 different levels too, like distinctly different level of player at all of those, on each of those teams, right? And so, it was important for me to be able to, not coach them all the same in terms of a team perspective, then obviously learn, how to not coach them all the same individually. In the off seasons, I ran our NBA player development stuff, our pre-draft training. We had 12 guys drafted and got in the gym with some pretty cool people and helped out at the NBA Combine. And so then, I was lucky enough to get a job as an assistant coach for the RGV Vipers. And if I was an indentured servant then, funny thing was that I took a pay cut to go to the Rio Grande Valley, right? Down by UT-RGV, down darn near in Mexico. They call Reynosa, right across the border, a war zone, right? But it was kind of a funny dynamic. One day, I'm unlocking the gym. I'm rolling the balls out. I'm sweeping the floors. I'm filling up the water bottles in this. We had a disgusting gym with no air conditioning and all types of different stuff. And the next day, I'm on the team bus with James Harden and Kevin McHale. So that was a pretty cool experience. But the biggest thing I think on my path from there was the ability to get in the room with the discussions, to me, that I always wanted to be a part of, right? Like I always wanted to know what was going on. To me, I always felt like high level, just coaching in general, and specifically like as it pertains to the NBA, it was like the Wizard of Oz. It's like there's this curtain, and we're all traveling through the woods and we're trying to see behind, like, man, what is going on back there? Like, what are they doing? And it's like, it's like, Mom, the meatloaf. You know what I mean? Like, you never know what she's doing back there, but you really want to know. You're like, man, like, what is that recipe? Because that's some damn good meatloaf. And so for me, I really wanted to know. And ultimately, that was the biggest thing was, I got in the room, right? So I'm in the room with Kevin McHale on his staff, and then he actually gets fired. And then I just remember, funny story, taking a piss at the urinal, and he comes in and like he's fired, right? And like he's sitting there and like it's just like you feel really bad for the guy, and he just says, "You know what, Cody, don't you cry one tear for me. They got to pay me $12 million to go fishing." And I said, "All right, I got you." right? And that was a good perspective, element of perspective for me. And so, then JB Bickerstaff came in, and I got to, be in the room for a lot of his meetings. And then, probably one of the best things that happened in my career was when the Rockets hired Mike D'Antoni. And that was just unbelievable, because now here I was in the room with the guy who, quite frankly, I idolized the Suns and everything that he did to change the game and to turn it into what it is today. And just to see how laid back he was and how open he was. And literally I learned offense. Because and this was also an interesting fact, obviously, as everybody I'm pretty sure is aware of right now, is that the Rockets, when they brought in Mike, what they did was they made a major cultural shift to running their basketball program like a football program, right? Offensive coordinator, offensive team, defensive coordinator, defensive team. And those were like separate, right? So of course we all would come back together, but your mornings would start with, like, the offense would have an offensive meeting. And, here I am learning offense in a room. I'm sitting there. It's Mike D'Antoni, it's Brett Gunning and Matt Brazzi and myself, just four dudes at a table, drinking coffee and just, shooting the shit. And so that was really incredible to be, in there and kind of, he was just the dude was an open book. He loves to share. And he loves to kind of be probed on questions about some of the things that he's done in the past, and then you can get him, boom, you can fire him up and get him going. And that's awesome. And then for me too, as an assistant coach on the G League team for the Vipers, and the Vipers and the Rockets are probably the best in the NBA. They're up there with like Sioux Falls and the Miami Heat in terms of like their ability to have like this synergy, right? One heartbeat, one band, one sound element. And so, I go down to the Valley as an assistant with Matt Brazzi and take everything that we learned from Coach D'Antoni from the off season, from training camp and all those things. And then, the best part to me about the G League was, similar to probably like JUCO basketball or whatever, you've got to wear all hats. You've got a small staff. You've really got to be solution-based. Russ hit the nail on the head right here. You've got to have the answers before the question. And to me, like, that's everything. You don't want to be a my bad guy. You got to be a I got you guy, right? I got you. Like, what's next? What can I do? If you've got, a sentence, right, and it's missing 2 or 3 words, can you figure out what those words are and put those in? Because the more problems that you can take off the plate of the head coach, to me, that's imperative. We had success in RGV. We got to the playoffs my first year, to the Western Conference Finals. We lost in heartbreaking fashion. It was a best of 3 series, lost in the 3rd game. And then my second year, we got all the way to the G League Finals, before we lost to, Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet. Turns out those guys are not bad. And, but we had a lot of success. And going into that next year, I felt like I was ready to take the next step. And I kept seeing, guys get jobs and things of this nature. And the big thing for me is taking it back to after my first year, talking with Matt Brazzi, who is probably my closest friend in the business. He, number one, he empowered me, right? And so this is where I'm also, from you guys, trying to find out, what is it like in college coaching, right? What is the norm versus what's the difference? Because I've been at the NBA level, and I'll just tell you, like, the schedules at the NBA level, you're going to meet with the staff every single day. The practice plan is pretty much a cooperative effort, right? Like, I've never seen a coach come into a practice with a practice plan completed. We start with a blank slate as a group. That has been in every NBA I've been in. So, and I digress. I don't want to put the cart ahead of the wheel, but that's why I have questions for you guys, right? When are you practicing practice time? When are you guys doing study hall? Things of these nature, because now I'm, here I am, I'm only 31 games deep into this thing, and I'm just kind of trying to evaluate and look back and figure out how I can better serve Coach Hardaway, right? Who's an unbelievable dude. And you talk about having open ears and, like, wanting input. He's as good at that as anybody I've seen. But I guess what Brazzi told me was, man, you prepare now, and he empowered me then, right? So as the offensive coordinator for the RGV Vipers, I led every single offensive self-scout film session. And what he was doing at the time, I didn't realize, but what he was doing was he was saving his voice, right? He didn't want to shoot all his bullets early, because when players continue to hear the same thing over and over and over again, you can beat a dead horse there, and you can really quickly turn them off to your teaching. And Joseph Blair was on that staff, who's now an assistant with the Philadelphia 76ers. He was the defensive coordinator. So he did all the defensive self-scouts. And then him and me took 50 games, split it down the middle, 25 scouts for each of us in terms of opponent scouts. And we were off to the races. And in that group, we had it was me and him as the assistants. It was Matt Brazzi as the head coach. And then we had a couple of, their G League intern spots. We called them coaching associate spots because we didn't treat these guys like interns. We teach these guys to, we wanted them to be coaches, and they were kind of like, our video coordinator, director of player development type stuff, right? Where we would empower them also to get reps, almost like a GA ship or, things of that nature. I had my head coaching presentation on lock, ready to go for a whole year. No calls, no interviews, no chances to get in that room and see what could happen. And then, we get to the G League finals and we lose, and it's the same thing, man, like, what's going on? So I go to NBA training camp, and I'm ready to go back again to RGV for my third season. And one day, then the season starts, right? So the season starts and Earl Watson gets fired in Phoenix. And I have no connection to the Suns. I don't know anybody over there. But ultimately what ends up happening is, I'm walking off the court one day at G League training camp, which is after NBA training camp. And general manager calls me in the office and said the Suns would like to talk to you about their head coaching opportunity. And so I went through that interview process. Obviously all of my stuff was prepared. It was ready to go. Insert Northern Arizona Suns logo here type deal. And I think what was unique about that situation, going through the process, was that Jay Triano was the interim head coach for the Suns. So we knew that they knew that there wasn't going to be that type of synergy, because training camp off season is where the G League creates the synergy with the NBA program, right? Because, if you want to have that whole, we're running the same stuff and all this type of stuff. Well, Jay Triano's system, he didn't have a training camp either. He's having to learn on the fly and put all his stuff in on the fly and make the changes that he wanted to make. So, but through that process, I was fortunate enough to get that job, and it was kind of like a plug and play. They wanted me to bring, really the Mike D'Antoni system back to Phoenix. They wanted to play a more progressive style, more analytically driven, as they were in the past. And we led the league in call-ups, and we also were one of the tops in the league in terms of points per game and offensive efficiency and things of that nature. And so then they hired Igor Koshkov, and I get the call up to the NBA bench to be an assistant on his staff. Third team plane flight, Jason Stout. I don't know if any of you guys know him, but he's an unbelievable basketball mind. He was actually our advanced scout in Houston, and he was on our staff in Phoenix. And he says to me on the team playing, DeAndre Ayton is either going to put your kid through college or get us all fired. It turns out it was the latter. But, 1 year after that, here I am, Igor gets relieved of his duties. We can debate the merits of that, but we all know we got into this business. And so, you have to take what comes with a grain of salt. So, here I was last year at this exact time. Easter happened, whatever. Woj breaks the news. I'm trying to watch Game of Thrones. You know what I mean? Like, why would Woj interrupt Game of Thrones? Like, he should know better than that. And instead of all of a sudden, I was like, okay, with Jon Snow. Oh, and then my wife just says Igor, and I'm like, I'm like, come on now, you got to be kidding me. And so, didn't know what was next. But what I did do was just dive back into the process. I had done pre-draft training in Miami before. My guy, Nick Friedman, who was an intern for us in RGV before being my assistant in Northern Arizona, who's now an assistant coach with the Hornets. I had kind of passed off my pre-draft platform to him, went back out there. The tides had turned. I was sleeping on his couch. I slept on his couch. I ran workouts for a week. I left my family to do those things and just kind of get back to regrounding myself and continue to push forward on this thing, right? Because you had felt like you just got to the apex, and you go from standing, like it'd been a long journey to that point, right? From from, empty gyms with no air conditioning to standing across from Greg Popovich, during the national anthem, giving him the wave. You know what I mean? Like Pop gave the wave, like, oh shit, that's Pop. He's giving the wave. And, now here you are like, hey, well, you tell me we got to pack up and move again. Well, that is brutal, right? So, but again, it's part of the business, and it was a huge learning, element for me. But I went out to Miami. I did the pre-draft there. I just, tried to connect and stay connected with the people who I built strong relationships with. Of note, that's interesting in my journey is that I've never been hired by someone with whom I had a prior relationship, and I think that might be unique. Matt Brazzi, didn't know him from Adam, had no idea who he was when I got the job with the Rockets and those guys. I didn't know anybody in that organization. Phoenix, I didn't know anybody in the organization there either before getting that job. And then randomly I got a phone call asking if I'd be interested in talking to Penny Hardaway about a spot on his staff. College wasn't even on my radar at all. And so then I went through the process with him, and ultimately I would say credit to him, also because he didn't know me. I mean, I knew this guy for about a month before he offered me the job, but but he offered me the job, and it's been great to this point. And obviously, he wants all the smoke. I'm not big on smoke, but we're navigating our waters over here, and it's been tremendous. A couple of things to piggyback on though that that Quinton and Russ had talked about, and also why I like to lead with a lot of I like to go with a lot of questions, right, and kind of hear how everybody else does stuff. But the big thing to me is I think that throughout this process, Kevin Eastman told me early, right, add value. And it's not just add value to staff, add value by doing things like this. This is to me, hopefully adding value to whoever's day, and I know quite a few of you guys on here. T Bardo, what's up, brother? I know like quite a few of you guys on this call. And like, the thing is, if I can add value to you guys, I mean, that's paying it forward. And ultimately at the end of the day, I think that comes back and it's going to help us all out because, this is not the CIA, right? One of the first coaching clinics I went to, Del Harris, this dude is ready to give you everything that he's ever learned. He's going to give. He's not going to be worried about, my play calls, my this, my that. And so he said this, one quote that resonated was like, this isn't the CIA. It's not. None of us have national secrets. This isn't some type of a situation where, we've got to hold on, keep the cards that close to the vest because like, there's only so many ways you can defend a ball screen, right? There's so many different things you can do offensively. Ultimately, these dudes are going to, they're going to make shots. They're going to miss shots. They're going to execute. They're not going to execute. But at the end of the day, right, we're all searching what's most efficient to help us. And so if you can add value, I think that's going to pay back. I mean, Kevin Eastman's big rule was, give for one full year before you ask of anybody, because, that's like a real relationship. Build a real relationship, add value to somebody else's day. And, if you've given for one full year, you can feel pretty secure about, asking for something in return. And I think that the biggest thing too is that all of us clearly, if you're on these calls, if you're doing this stuff, if you're watching this coaching clinic stuff like me, we're all, thirsty to learn. Like we're going to go back and we're going to do all this stuff, anyways, right? Like the whole thing is like, sometimes my wife gives me crap. Like, why have you rewatched every single one of your games from the past year? Like, why have you, why are you, and I mean, obviously she's joking, like, but why are you writing a 3-page player development report on Precious Achiuwa? He's not coming back. You know what I mean? Like, why are you doing all these things? And it's like, well, one, I would be doing them anyways because I enjoy them. And two, because, it's helping me hone my craft. And again, it's adding value to, Precious's future, or it's adding value to, as we look back and evaluate, what went wrong, for us this season, right? I mean, we got ranked as high as number 9 in the country, and it's like, obviously we lost James Wiseman, but like, what caused our 3-game slide during the middle of the year? What, and how can we get better? And what side of the ball was it, and trying to find that edge. So, my whole thing is this: when I was making $25,000, when I was making $35,000, like my whole goal is I'm going to do a $3 million job. Then I'm going to do a $3 million job now. I'm going to, like, nothing changes. My workflow doesn't change. Russ said that, his paycheck's gone up every year, right? I've been fortunate for that same thing to happen. But the thing is too, right? Well, I have a joke back from that. Let's run it back. So you give 10%, right? If you just change, if you're Mormon, right, you give like 25%, you're going to get way more stuff back. I mean, the math, you just got me thinking about the math on that, right? So you might want to look into switching over. I hear they live a great life, but it's a joke. But back to my point though, like literally, do the job right now as if the next game you're playing is game 7. And I used to tell this to our G League players all the time. I would say, because we had, like, let's see, it was, game 45, right, in the G League. I mean, that's a hell of a game right there because, a lot of these dudes are seeing the end of the season come. They know they're not getting call-ups, things of that nature, right? But I let them know, listen, Nick Friedman did the scout tonight like it's game 7 of the NBA Finals. We're gonna do the pregame warm-up like it's game 7 of the NBA Finals. I'm gonna coach the damn game like it's game 7 of the NBA Finals. And y'all better play like it's game 7 of the NBA Finals. Because the thing is, if you don't, and I tell this to Daniel House, if you don't treat Damon Lee from the Santa Cruz Warriors as if it's Kawhi Leonard, what the hell makes you think you're going to be ready to guard Kawhi Leonard when that moment actually comes? And the answer is you won't be ready, and, certain guys take that message and they run with it because ultimately at the end of the day, it's Hunger Games basketball, right? You eat what you kill, and if you don't kill anything, you starve. And, to me, that was the way I just approached coaching, right? Like I was coaching my Elevate kids, some of you guys on this call, it came down and recruited my guys, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like it felt like blue chips. We're going to go see Neon Badeau hiking through the backwoods, right, Chris? Like we're going through the bushes and then we come into the gym that's got like flies and no air conditioning. But, I was going to run that practice like it was, like we were a NBA playoff team. And so I think that was a huge thing. The other thing, obviously I've been fortunate enough to be a head coach. So it's funny. There's a couple of things that are funny about this game of coaching, right? And again, my wife tells me I get long-winded. So when I get boring or crusty, you guys just tell me, shut up and we can cut this thing off. But, it's like musical chairs, right? Like we're all trying to slide chairs over, right? And it's like the funny thing is how you can slide literally. And if you think about this in the context of the room, when I'm in the room with Mike D'Antoni, right? Here I am making nothing, right? Peanuts or whatever, right? I make what he makes every 2 weeks, like for the year or whatever. And it's like you slide, 15 inches, depending on the width of your chair, obviously, right? Whatever, 15 inches to the left, you know what I mean? Your salary doubles 15 inches again. And it, quadruples 15 inches again. And it's like, holy hell, like, that's like a 1,000% increase. Like, and it's funny how that works. But the thing is as you slide over, the responsibility changes. And once you get into the big boy chair, you really truly have a tremendous amount of respect for what it means, to what the losses mean more than anything. Because at the end of the day, there's only one dude who takes a loss with him. There's a couple guys on this call, right, who are taking losses at night. I mean, ask Carmen, even though he doesn't lose much, he took over and didn't really miss. He didn't skip a beat, but there's only one guy who's going to take a loss with him to bed at night. It's not the players. It's not the assistants. It's not the athletic trainer. It's the head coach, right? And so you get just a different level of respect for that position once you've sat in it. And so for me, sitting in that position and knowing what it's like after a 3-game skid on the road, you know what I mean? Like where all of a sudden, like, you're second guessing, like, am I built for this? You're second guessing, your offensive concepts, your defensive concepts, right? You just get a newfound respect for that position and what it means to truly have the back of your head coach. And so for me, going from that spot to the NBA, where then I was supporting Igor as his assistant, you know what I mean? I just had a different level of respect for everything that he was going through. And then, I've tried to carry that over here, with Coach Hardaway, who obviously, like, we all know his story as a player. And then he's kind of gone from this way, from the grassroots up, right? So he's never had a staff. He's never had an organization, right? When you're coaching AAU, it's the same as when you're coaching, at Elevate, right? It's just, a couple of 2-3 dudes and we're out here ready to rock. And so, for me, right, trying to become the best assistant is about how can I support that guy the best with having a full understanding and respect for what it means for him to take a loss. Another thing that I live by as a head coach, and that lucky for me, all the people who I've worked for, have really been good about, is like team meetings and like friendly conflict within these meetings. And it takes a lot of you can't be soft, number one, right? We don't want our players to be soft, silent, or selfish, and we can't be those things either ourselves, right? And part of being soft to me is the inability to respect somebody else's opinion if it differs from yours, but then also the ability to respect the head coach's decision, whatever that is, right? You don't want to be silent because just because everybody in the room, to me, is going one direction, if you feel convicted about something to go another direction, to me, it's your duty to the team, right, to make your opinion known. Whether it's adopted or not, we're all professional suggestion makers, except for one guy. There's one decision maker, right? So we make the suggestions, they make the decisions. That's our job. If we don't make the suggestions or we keep something to ourselves because we're worried about how it's going to be perceived, then what that is that's a selfish act, right? So we don't want to be soft, silent, or selfish. And the other thing is, to me, like what I love, and Coach Hardaway is great about this, and we're trying to find our own rhythm here as a staff too, is the meetings, man. Like the meetings are everything to me. And the reason why I say this is I say it not from from a standpoint of, I never truly understood the value of the meetings until I was the head coach, because I'd come in after a game and I'm ready, man, our transition defense sucked. I'm going to hammer these guys. We're going to transition defense drill. We're going to go baseline touch. We're going to tell one guy's going to touch, and then we're going to do two guys, and then we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. And it's the middle of the season. It's like, whoa. Like sometimes you just need to go paintball. Sometimes you just need to go to a movie. Sometimes you need to take these guys, to an escape room to learn how to do teamwork. It's not always about these other things, but on those days where I come in and I'm ready to hammer the guys, if you're having these good, healthy meetings where everybody feels like they can speak up and speak their mind, which was like every NBA meeting I'd ever been in, like, hell, Jay Triano doesn't even know me from Adam. I'm the new freaking G League coach. Like, me and him have spoken on the phone like twice, and I'm in his meetings, and this dude, I'm over in the corner like I'm up against the wall, and he's like, hey, Cody, what do you think? Like, well, and that leads me to the next thing is always have an opinion. Always have an opinion. Don't stand on the fence. You don't help anybody in this business if you stand on the fence, because we're all judged on wins and losses, and your opinion could help us go either direction, could help us win a game or lose a game. But if you're just indifferent, you're not adding any value. So to me, like those meetings were huge, right? And I'd always sit in there with like Matt Browser, even with D'Antoni or whatever, and D'Antoni, he's not a big like yeller type dude or anything like that, where he's coming in with some but he is like one of the most collaborative guys that I've seen, where he wants to lead with questions and he probes with questions, and that's how he arrives to his solutions. And then, Matt Browse was very similar, but there were I can think of so many times because of, and I've been in the coaching meetings for 5 NBA staffs: McHale, Bickerstaff, Jay Triano, Igor Kokoshkov, and D'Antoni, right? And so again, that common theme is the desire to hear everybody's opinion. But what I've seen is a lot of times a coach come in and say, hey, I want to go one direction with a practice plan, right? And then ultimately when we leave that room, we're going almost a completely different direction, right? Like maybe these 2 or 3 things, like maybe today's not the day for, some, whatever, like, we got the Miami Heat, like the Pat Riley fun run with the hands up, you know what I mean? Like our punishment deal, because Mike and Penny both, we're with the Heat organization, maybe today's not the day to hammer their legs. I'm the load management guy saying, hey, like, we only got 2 days before a big game, and we're playing a team that averages 76 possessions a game. Like, we got to be gassed up for that. So to me, like, those are different things that can come out of those meetings. But my philosophy on those meetings is debate, disagree, commit. Debate, disagree, commit. Whatever we commit to, and we leave those rooms. And so to me, like, that's everything in the game of basketball. That's how you can add value to your coach's day. I don't care if you're the ops guy. I don't care if you're this guy or that guy or this. And of course, you're always having ongoing conversation with, with your head coach and all that stuff, like on the side and things of that nature. But